Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here today on this amazingly beautiful Sunday. My name is Dr. Megan McGinley-Arnone. I'm the Director of Education here at Sag Harbor Cinema, and we're absolutely thrilled to welcome you all for this projections program, Death Reimagined, 35 Years of Compassion, Comfort, and Community with East End Hospice. The cinema designed projections as a community outreach platform for regional nonprofit organizations and community initiatives, one that centers education and connection. Through the projections platform, we hope to amplify voices, begin conversations, and cultivate community. So it means a lot that you all are here today. I'm going to introduce you to our esteemed panelists, but first I'd like to thank the Sag Harbor Cinema Board and Education Committee, especially Bill Collage, who dreamt the projection series into being. I'd also like to thank the Sag Harbor Cinema staff, without whom I would not be able to do this work, and our panelists and moderators who have dedicated their time, energy, passion, and knowledge to this panel discussion. On that note, I'd like to introduce you to them. First, we have Mary Crosby. Mary is the president and CEO of East End Hospice. She assumed this role in 2019. Mary has an extensive background in clinical care, healthcare research, and project management. She previously held positions at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center and the United Nations, where she oversaw initiatives to improve maternal health in over 40 countries. Mary was born and raised in Southampton, New York, and returned to the region in 2014. Before assuming the role of president and CEO, she worked as a hospice nurse and later as a nurse manager of East End Hospice's inpatient facility, the Canis Center for Hospice Care. She holds degrees from the College of the Holy Cross, Columbia University, and New York University's School of Nursing. Mary is a member of the Board of Trustees of Hospice and Palliative Care Association of New York State. She and her husband Hilton and their 2 sons live in Southampton, where she is an EMT with the Southampton Village Ambulance. Thank you so much, Mary, for being here. Next to Mary, we have Carol Gray, who is a licensed clinical social worker who takes a compassionate, whole person approach to care. She specializes in trauma recovery, bereavement, and neurocognitive support, and holds a master's degree in social work from Stony Brook University. Since joining East End Hospice in 2021, Carol has provided supportive care to patients and families at the Canis Center for Hospice Care, helping them navigate the emotional and practical challenges of serious illness with dignity and compassion. She also serves as a therapist with Camp Good Grief, which we'll learn more about today, supporting children and teens through loss using counseling, creative expression, and peer connection. Outside of East End Hospice, Carol works with individuals experiencing anxiety, depression, and trauma, fostering resilience and healing in a supportive environment. Thank you for being here, Carol. Next, we have Brianna Hernández. Brianna is a Chicana artist, curator, educator, and death doula, guided by socially engaged practices. In the studio, she creates multimedia installations focused on end-of-life care, grief, and mourning rituals based on lived experience, cultural research, and collaborations with peers, including death education workshops. In developing as an artist and creative professional, Brianna credits her late mother, Sylvia D. Hernández, as her most significant mentor and inspiration for the creativity, resilience, and compassion she demonstrated throughout her life. Brianna proudly serves as Director of Curation and Board Secretary of Ma's House and BIPOC Art Studio on the Shinnecock Indian Reservation in Southampton, New York. As a curator, Brianna works with artists to make socially charged topics publicly accessible in order to create opportunities for education and empathy, like this one today. Her curatorial project, Reclaiming Death. She was the recipient of a Hyperallergic 2023-2024 Emily Hall Tremaine Journalism Fellowship for Curators. Thank you, Brianna, for being here. And moderating the discussion, we're very lucky to have our own Genevieve Villaflor, the executive director of Sag Harbor Cinema. Genevieve has been involved with film festivals, nonprofit organizations, and specialty publicity firms working in programming, PR, fundraising, special events, and artist support. She worked on early editions of the Virginia Film Festival before moving to New York City to start a 15-year tenure at Film at Lincoln Center during the opening of the Walter Reed Theater. Over the years, she served on juries and lectured on film festivals, serving on the Sundance Film Festival's advisory committee for features and documentaries from 1995 to 1998. In addition to working at the Hamptons International Film Festival, Film Movement, and Sundance Channel, Genevieve most recently worked at the Gotham, where she managed the IFP HBO New True Stories Funding Initiative, supporting nonfiction projects in the early development stage. Thank you so much, all of you, for being here. Genevieve, I will give the mic to you.
Hi, everybody. This is quite an honor for me to be hosting and moderating this particular panel. My tenure here at the cinema will be ending next month, and I am very proud to have stewarded this incredible nonprofit organization for the last 4.5 years, including starting the first projections back in August 2021 with the Plain Sight Project. And so it's like a great bookend for me to have these incredible organizations being part of projections and the work that we do here at the cinema. So first of all, I want to say congratulations to the East End Hospice for 35 years. And I wanted to find out, what was it? How did it come about? How did you start the hospice out here all those years ago? And what were the needs of the community at that time?
Sure. So first, thank you for having us. Our goal always is to get more people to have conversations like this and get more people into rooms like this. So it's wonderful to be here, and thank you for the platform. East End Hospice started as a neighbors helping neighbors kind of an organization, very grassroots. There were two movements happening sort of at the same time, one on the South Fork, one on the North Fork, of people saying, this is something we need out here, right? So it was the early 90s. So hospice as a movement had obviously started significantly before that, much sort of in response to the AIDS epidemic, where many people were dying at home without the support they needed. Out on the East End, people started to see this need amongst their friends and families, and that really is what started the organization. So we started as an independent nonprofit, and we still are, which in the healthcare system is quite shocking, actually, especially on Long Island as larger systems begin to sort of integrate and acquire smaller entities like ours. We've remained fiercely independent because we know that's what drives the exceptional care that we provide.
I'm just going through your website. The facilities are amazing. The Canis Center is great. Camp Good Grief. Can you give us a little overview of all of the different services that you offer? And maybe also we should start with, in terms of a kind of a definition of hospice.
Sure.
And exactly at what point in your care does that typically begin?
So hospice is end-of-life care for patients and their families, and it's a broad spectrum of services that are offered. The vast majority of our patients are cared for in their homes, and that's across the entire East End, as far east as you can go, Shelter Island, all the way west, almost to Patchogue. In 2016, another need arose, which is the need for inpatient hospice care for those patients who can't be cared for at home, who have a medical need that really far extends what can be done in a home environment. And so in 2016, we opened the Canis Center, which is our inpatient unit. It's a 6-bed facility for those patients who are requiring a higher level of medical care. So on home hospice, it's an interdisciplinary team. It's a holistic approach. So each patient is assigned a nurse, a social worker, a volunteer if they want one, a home health aide, home health aides, who are quite literally the backbone of our organization, provide the most intimate and personal care, helping people get dressed, bathed, showered, whatever they need. We have this, and a provider, a physician or a nurse practitioner, this small team of people that respond to the needs of this patient, not just their medical needs, but of course, those can be many medical needs, interventions, medical equipment, hospital beds, wheelchairs, oxygen, and then also this sort of psychosocial, which I can let Carol speak about a little bit. All of those services are brought to the home. And the goal is to keep people comfortable, to keep them out of the hospital. And really, there is a time frame. I hate to lead with it because I think it really kind of trips people up when you say, well, hospice is available to patients who have a prognosis of less than 6 months. What we know sitting up here is that providers' ability to prognosticate is difficult and often incorrect. So we like to talk more about goals of care. When your loved one doesn't want aggressive interventions anymore, is seriously ill, with a wide range of diagnoses. Sometimes people think hospice is only cancer, and they want to remain out of the hospital and focus more on their pain and symptom management. Then they're probably ready for hospice. And at that time, we can come out and evaluate them.
So hospice is also not, you come onto hospice and you're expected to die quickly. So there's people who have been on hospice for weeks, for months, in some cases, years. So I think what I've come across is people think that hospice is giving up, and it's really not. It's about goals of care, trying to support the family. On the psychosocial side, our team, whether you're the social worker or even the nurse, the emotional support and education that we supply to the family, to the patient, is forever ongoing. So many times we come across, one question I always ask is, have you ever experienced hospice? Have you ever experienced someone close to you who had a terminal diagnosis and died? And it's really very mixed. Sometimes you get across people who in their late 40s and never experienced a very close death. And that's where the additional support that East End Hospice provides comes in handy, because we're going to be by your side and explain to you when you need it, right? Because it's a lot of information at one time, but what does it mean at the end of life? What are the symptoms? What are opportunities do we have to create a little bit more quality of life when we know end of life is happening? So kind of holding someone's hand and explaining the symptoms, the dying process, is really very helpful. And luckily, in our organization, it's always focused on what the family and the patient needs.
Let's bring Brianna into the conversation a little bit. As a death doula, can you give us a kind of definition or how you perceive your role to be at the end of life care, and how that might intersect with the work that a hospice like East End Hospice would do?
Well, first, I just also wanted to say thank you for having me, especially, with East End Hospice. I'm such a fan in terms of quality of care. It really is outstanding compared to a lot of different hospice experiences, which is part of where the death doula conversation comes in. Death doulas, I'd like to say, for those who have never heard of one before or only have heard random things, you can compare it to a birth doula in the way that someone supporting a birth can help you with preliminary planning. When you're deciding to have a child, they can help you throughout a pregnancy. They can help you with delivery. They can help you afterwards. They can help you with that whole spectrum, but they can also help you with just one part of it. And a death doula is the same way. Sometimes you can work with someone who is looking at the paperwork needed for end-of-life planning, which can happen with someone who's young and healthy and not expecting to die anytime soon. You can also enlist doula services when you have received a terminal diagnosis, or even after a sudden loss, if you are just having an overwhelming feeling dealing with all the logistics that come with death. And so a death doula intersecting with hospice can happen in some really direct ways. If you have someone supporting you through active dying and they are that extra social and care support, important to note that it's non-medical, but there's often a lot of social overlap with that hospice team, or in indirect ways where your hospice team is focused on making sure that that care for your comfort is the best that it can be. And if you meet with a death doula well in advance of any assumed diagnoses or aging or unexpected death planning, then when you get to that point, you're able to be more present and have trust that the hospice team is providing that care that's needed so that you can focus on other things. Whereas maybe if you haven't had that conversation with a death doula or someone in your community who knows how to have that conversation, you might show up to a hospice situation and be so overwhelmed that you're asking things of that team that maybe they're not able to provide with time or resources, or because your needs might be specific to something that it needs more time to develop than you might have working with them.
At Ma's house, you've curated an exhibition called Reclaiming Death. As an artist, how does that inform the work that you do as a doula, as a death doula?
Well, I'm actually an artist first. I've always been an artist. I've been an artist my entire life, but my work switched to focus on end of life after being my mother's caregiver in the final year of her life. And part of the main goal with Reclaiming Death is to get folks more comfortable, not only with the conversation of death, but also with how cultural practices that have been lost for various reasons can be part of empowering us to navigate that experience in a way that is healing, in a way that gives us agency, and also that is specific to our personal and cultural backgrounds.
That's really important, and I think that that's something that the East End Hospice really gives bespoke care to everybody in terms of how the emotional and spiritual support is part of the care. Can you talk a little bit about that? And also maybe the Camp Good Grief and everybody who it affects.
So I think that, Brianna makes a really good point. Here's what we know about hospice. People come to hospice way too late, especially in the state of New York, where hospice is vastly underutilized, more so than any other state in the country. And so the work that Brianna's doing, which can happen long before someone even receives a terminal diagnosis, informs the work that we're doing at end of life, because the more prepared people come when we receive them, the better. And unfortunately, because people tend to enlist hospice, again, it's available to people with a 6-month prognosis, but more than half of our patients die within 6 days of being on our program. So the service is not being utilized, and this also creates this kind of narrative that hospice comes in the last days of life and gives morphine and the patient dies, and that becomes the myth that's perpetuated about what we do, when really we can come in so much sooner than that. But a big part of getting there is having these conversations, and they're actually they're easier to do when you don't have a terminal diagnosis and you're not in the throes of a medical emergency where lots of decisions might need to be made very quickly. Before that, when you step back in the process and you have these conversations with your family, it's this beautiful gift that you can give to them without the pressure of that moment of some sort of like medical crisis. So I think that that's really important. And Carol, do you want to talk about camp?
So Camp Good Grief is one of the most magical places to see children meet other children who have experienced loss. I think as adults, we don't give children enough credit. They know what's going on around. They are going to respond to the way you're handling things. Often I find people say, I don't want to tell them that grandma's dying, that grandma's sick. And if we don't tell them, if we're not honest with them, they're going to make up their own narrative. And then we do an injustice to them. We want to normalize death. We normalize life. We have to normalize death. So at camp, we do a lot of therapeutic, very subtle supports all through play. And the kids are moved through different activities, but it's always based about the positive things in life. And then we do a separate group with it's all divided by age. Usually the groups are between 8 and 12 children in a group. And the most magical things happen when a child sits down and hasn't spoken to anybody about their mother dying. And they look over like, your mom died? My mom died. How did your mom die? My mom died like that too. And the connection is there, and the expression just flows. We know we grieve. And if you don't talk about it, it harbors inside. Grief comes out one way or another. It's going to come out in depression, sadness, unmotivated, not being able to get out of bed, sleeping too much. But if we talk about it, if kids talk about it, they're going to really blossom and get through this so much easier.
And I think I know that kids are not inherently afraid of death. And that's something that they learn. And just like Carol said, even when there's a death close to them, if they're not told the truth about it, if people aren't honest about it, if they try to shield the whole experience away from a child, it can do a considerable amount of damage. And it also allows them to get creative in their own minds, which is not always good, about why something happened, and make connections that are not real. So much of Camp Good Grief, and also our year-round bereavement services that we offer through the Zinberg Family Bereavement Center, where we have children's groups and individual therapy and groups for adults. A lot of that work is undoing these voices and the narratives that people have developed over time because of the fear of death and of the experience. And just to go back to what Brianna was saying, some of these older rituals around death are so important, because what they did was they brought death into the light. And people historically always died at home and died amongst their family members, and children of all ages were there and watched it happen. And that was very much a part of life. Now we have moved death away to hospitals, to ICUs, where there's limitations on visitors, and things have changed in that way. And a lot of these conversations are just about thinking back on how we used to do things and how we can do it better now.
Yeah. So you've been doing this for over 30 years, and I think the camp as well has been about 31 years. You've been sharing all of the things that you've learned. I mean, what I'm hearing is that we need to sort of start planning this earlier than we think we should. And what are some of the things that we could do? I know that we have some literature at the table over there, but how can we all prepare? And, it's obviously depending on your age or when you feel you need to do it, or if you have an illness. But
can I jump in on that particular point?
For sure.
I actually am on a mission to break through that myth that this is only something you talk about at a certain age. Because the really hard truth is that children die. Children get cancer, and people in their teens get into car accidents, and people in their 20s also get cancer. And people in their 30s, maybe they're in a really abusive relationship and something happens and they are killed. Things can happen at any age, and it's not to scare people to say that. It's just to say that assuming you are promised that time until a certain age, either through just dying of old age or that you only get terminal diagnosis past a certain age, is part of that disservice to oneself and one's community and one's care. And I think a huge part of what is needed at the beginning of all that is to be comfortable having that conversation. So part of it is that cultural aspect. Part of it is sitting down with yourself, with your loved ones, and talking about what matters to you. How do you want to be cared for if something happens and you're unable to communicate? What do you want to happen to your body when you're gone? Do you care, or do you want it to be something that comforts your family? It's not only about the empowerment that it gives to ourselves to have that conversation so that we're prepared if and when something happens before we think it will, because it might. But also to take that burden off of our loved ones. When a sudden death occurs and nobody knows what your wishes are, people are much more likely to start fighting about what that would have been. So I always like to say, it's better to start talking about it as if you are not promised another single day, not to scare you, but to empower you to decide for yourself so that someone else isn't deciding for you.
When I started working for East End Hospice, we sat around the Thanksgiving table. And of course, the conversation now comes up where I never would have. And we had conversation. And when my husband told me his choice of what he would like at the end of his life, I'm like, really? Oh, well, I'm glad you told me, because I was doing something totally different. And we also, one holiday, I came prepared with my healthcare proxy form. I mean, my family does not think I'm crazy. I'm like, we need to know who's going to be in charge of things. And we talked about power of attorney. We talked about funeral home. What do you want? Do you want a celebration of life? And so we now, as the siblings are still all together, we know what each and every one of us want. So we've had that conversation, and then our children hear it, and it's normal, and it's acceptable.
We have brought some materials that are just meant to sort of get you having those conversations, thinking about them. 5 Wishes is one of them that really ask those questions that Carol was just speaking about. We've left some of those materials here. There's lots of stuff out there, but it's a reminder that the medical system is not necessarily set up to accommodate the death that many people want, who are able to verbalize what they want in their final days. And that can be tricky. And that's why the preparation needs to take place, because there are documents like a DNR or a MOLST, which are medical orders, that when filled out, speak for you when you no longer can. And those are orders that can't be changed. They can't be switched even by a loved one or a medical provider. That's your voice. And those documents and that kind of planning are so important, because otherwise you begin to be kind of working against the system you can at times. And many people who want to die at home don't end up dying at home for some of those reasons. So we did provide some materials for anybody who wants to grab anything, just thought pieces to get you thinking about some of those difficult questions. I personally believe that choosing your healthcare proxy is absolutely the most important thing that you can do in your life. Not just one, pick 2, and make sure that that person is someone you inherently trust and who knows what you would want. Because ultimately, they're the ones who would make decisions for you and carry out your wishes. And that's a part of planning that, you can do and should do as young as possible. Everybody should have a healthcare proxy.
I hate to ask the question, but I think that people are probably curious about costs. And is this something that is actually viable for me? Can I make this happen for my family? So Can we just touch on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a very important point. We, on the East End, healthcare resources, especially home care, are scarce and difficult because we have a workforce problem out here on the East End. So it's important for people to know that Medicare has a hospice benefit. It has for many years, and that covers the cost of hospice care to a certain extent. Actually, my director of development, Emily Madsen, is here. She'll tell you that we also have to do quite a bit of fundraising. So the reimbursement we receive from Medicare covers about 80% of the actual cost of caring for our patients, because we go above and beyond and do so much more than what is traditionally required of us through the Medicare program. In addition to Medicare, most commercial insurances do have a hospice benefit. We take patients regardless of their insurance status, whether they have no insurance at all, they're underinsured, whether their insurance doesn't have a hospice benefit, we'll always accept them at East End Hospice. And again, we do a lot of fundraising. We have a lot of great community support and philanthropic donors who make sure that we can continue out here as an independent organization, doing not just the minimum that's asked of us as a certified hospice, but much, much more. And so it is covered. You will never receive a bill from East End Hospice. We think that medical bills are some of the most stressful parts of being sick. And when patients come to us, we want to remove at least that one little stressor.
And would that be the same for a death doula, or having that kind of care as well covered?
So there's not a standardized system in terms of death doulas being part of the medical insurance system. There's some places that are doing, some states that are trying to adopt it. I know, you guys mentioned you have someone that's part of the team there. But a lot of death doulas, because we have such a wide array of specialties and help at different points in the process of thinking about end of life, a lot of us tend to either do work that is completely free in terms of death education, or offer sliding scales depending on someone's needs. And something that myself and a lot of other people in my death doula circle tend to do is we provide tools and education that then families and loved ones can feel empowered to enact themselves. Because a huge part of it is just simply knowing what to expect and what to do, and feeling like you're allowed to do those things. That sometimes when you're in the thick of a medical crisis, you can feel like, oh, I'm not supposed to do that. That's something that the doctor has to tell me I'm allowed to do, when really it's just basic, love and care that you're showing to your family. And so it really can range, but there are different directories, like in ELDA and Going with Grace, have directories based off of location where you can find death doulas that match the type of services that you're looking for and that are in your area. And they can tell you more about what those scales are.
I really didn't know much about a death doula until I started watching The Pit. So, one question I had is, what guidance do you most often offer? What helps move through this experience with less fear and more presence? Through your vast experiences, can you share that?
Sure. Well, the nurse in me wants to talk about pain and symptom management and how well we do that, because it is our expertise. And I sometimes think that one of my least favorite things, let me start there, that physicians and doctors and providers will say is, oh, there's nothing else we can do for you. You have this terminal illness and there's nothing else we can do for you. Instead of reframing it to say, there is a lot we can do for you. We can offer you hospice care, which is a tremendous amount of support in your home, free of charge. And that we no longer can do anything for you feeds into the whole I'm giving up. And people have this fear, oh, if I go home, I'll have pain and I won't know what to do and I won't know who to call, and hospice, won't know what to do either. And so, we do provide this expert level of care. And we've had patients. We had a 26-year-old who came on our program to get her pain controlled and her symptoms controlled so she could go back on a clinical trial, which she did. So she came onto our program strictly for pain and symptom management. So we are experts in that field. And it's important for people to know that, so they know they're still going to receive this expert level care from people who are specifically trained in managing pain, shortness of breath, nausea and vomiting, and all these things that you see at end of life. That's a big, big part of what we do. But I know Carol will want to talk more about psychosocial, which is honestly just as big of a part of it.
So as a social worker, when I meet families, the first thing is hearing their story. Understanding how we got to today, what happened last week, 2 weeks ago, last year. It's really important to be heard. And it's also helpful for us to understand more of who the person is in front of us, because then we know how to connect with them better, even if they're not able to speak to us. But if we know what kind of music they like, or what kind of TV shows they like, or flowers, we try to really cater some specialty things to them. So it's important for families to be able to tell their story and for me to listen and let me acknowledge what they're experiencing and normalizing it, saying those questions, you're absolutely right. And yes, this is horrific that you're going through this. And then we start focusing on how do we want the next few days to go? What are the goals? What would your mom like? How can we do that? How are you coping with things? Are you eating? Are you drinking? So it's even, our philosophy is that when something happens to one person, so primarily the patient, it affects everybody else around them. So it's our collective responsibility to support the patient, the family, the additional family, the friends, and we do that. So people will stop by my office and just say, just checking in, how are things going? Can you tell me a little bit more? And the whole conversation just evolves. So having that additional support from the social worker, the nurse, is really helpful because many times we just don't know what to expect. And when you've already reached this point where you're facing the end of life of someone you love, you don't even know what questions to ask. And then I have the job of asking some hard questions. Did you know what her wishes are? We didn't talk about it. Okay, let's unpack that. Let's talk about religion or spirituality. Where'd she grow up? So we open up this whole conversation and we have this opportunity to kind of try and piece together what they think their loved one would want at the end of life. And then later on, we talk about bereavement. So there's a lot of information that comes out when someone's on hospice or when the family first comes to us. And we kind of do it in stages because it's overwhelming. At Canis, of course, our nurses are around the clock. We have a designated social worker who's there at least 6 days a week. You never know when these questions come up. And we're always available by phone or by email. And when I meet families out into the community, one thing I tell them, if you wake up at 12 o'clock at night and you're like, I don't know what I'm seeing, don't wait till 9 a.m. because you think it's an inconvenience. Call. Really? I can call? You can call. Someone's going to call you back. And if we need to come, we're going to come. And the peace of mind is worth every possible moment. People don't know that. So we have to give you the education. So education is key.
That's amazing. That's really great. Did you want to say something, Brianna? Or?
Yeah, I mean, my approach as an artist and bringing creativity into the conversation is really one through a lot of workshops where I find that both in terms of this fear of anticipating death, but also in terms of feeling kind of withheld grief. Whenever I do workshops on creative memorials, both ends of that spectrum end up finding new ways of expressing those fears or wishes or the parts of their mourning that they have locked away. And sometimes it's really as simple as just giving an example. Because we have such a detached relationship from death in the society, sometimes it's really as simple as just putting up a picture of the Great Pyramid at Giza and saying, hey, this is a tomb, right? This is like a fancy piece of architecture and this tourist attraction, but it's a literal tomb. And so this is one other way a memorial could look. What would you make yours look like? And then people start getting ideas. And it's something as simple as that, of just a frame of reference and the permission to be creative can really help people start addressing that fear of anticipation so that they can have those conversations about the answers that they'll need to provide for hospice, or that maybe someone they've been grieving that they haven't let it out, they can finally express how much they miss that person.
I'll ask one more question and then we can open it up to questions. So this panel or this discussion is about reconsidering death. I guess my question is, what do you hope might change about the relationship of this universal experience of death? I mean, we've talked about it, trying to start earlier, those kinds of things, but this is another last chance opportunity to kind of just say how in our society or our experience we would like this to be more available or accessible, or through my own personal experience, I never had a chance to have hospice care for my loved ones, but palliative care was part of it. And I've always looked at that as like an extension of hospice care or the beginnings of hospice care. But what would be our takeaway from having this discussion today? Do you want to start?
I'll just continue on that thought of creativity. That's a huge focus and goal with the exhibition Reclaiming Death, is that every artist who's participating is approaching this topic from their own cultural perspective. So everyone in the show has a different way of navigating and processing and expressing thoughts about death practices. I feel like that cultural aspect, it shows us that there are many, many ways we can grieve, many, many ways we can honor death. And also that community that surrounds those cultures is something that is integral to our humanity. I think that the absence of death in our cultural practice, in our daily lives, is not just one of, oh, I need to be able to like get this paperwork done and I'm afraid of that. It's no, there's a huge part of your living experience that's missing because this isn't there. You know, we have these really elaborate ways of hosting a wedding, or of the elaborate things that people do for someone's graduation ceremony. Death is just as important in all of those things. And so for me, that aspect is, that cultural part of death is something that is missing in our lives as well.
So what I wish is that for people to be aware of hospice, that the service is available to everybody, that you have a choice, and that we normalize death and prepare for it, but have conversation. And then so if you're aware and accepting that death is coming, then we have opportunity to talk about the life well lived instead of focusing on the death. Let's focus on the life.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. We take a moment to ask every single one of our patients about something they would like to do that they haven't done in a while, something they've never done that we could possibly make happen. And as a result of those special wishes and requests, we've gotten, a 96-year-old man into a fishing tournament out on a boat again after not being out on the water for, 5 years. We've taken people to Broadway shows, and we have a number of pediatric patients who we've made very special wishes come true for. And that's, again, all part of this reimagining death as something that's very much a part of life. And for those of us who work in this space, it really, truly is. It changes your entire perspective on life to be in the death space every day. You don't even realize it sometimes how casually you speak about death until you do it in front of someone. They're like, shocked. But it's true. Speaking honestly about it, saying, not using euphemisms and really bringing death into life in that way is to me, Death Reimagined.
That's amazing. It's amazing work that you all do. So let's open it up to questions. Megan's got a microphone if anybody has a question for our panelists.
So I have a microphone, and if anyone wrote down a question, I'd love to collect that from you. It's to Genevieve to read. A question that they wrote down? Okay, perfect. So I will hand this to Genevieve, and I'll hand you the microphone.
I just had a question. You have a very comprehensive approach to the end of life. So I was just wondering if there's somebody that addresses the spiritual end of things. I'm sure it probably falls into Carol's lap quite a bit. But does hospice have like a spiritual director, so to speak?
Well, that's a very good question. So we do help to facilitate getting any sort of pastoral care to the home or to the Canis Center. So on our staff, we have Pastor Bob Griffin. He'll come visit our patients weekly at Canis. He will also go visit patients at home. He's non-denominational. Then, of course, we reach out to the local churches, around Canis. And when they're not available, because there is a shortage of priests in the Catholic Church, we reach out to further. So we have a little bit of some resources. And then on occasion, we've had some people who are Buddhist. So we've reached out to their resources and have had them come in. And even there's people on our staff who practice Buddhism, and they step up and they come in. We have a relationship with someone who was interning for chaplain. So she's available, just a phone call away if we need somebody. So yeah, we help support or bring that support into our patients and their needs.
Yeah, and that's something that we've gotten creative about. As we find fewer patients come to us associated with a traditional religion. We do have quite a few who are, but there are many who are not. And so when we speak about spirituality, we cast a very wide net to try to understand what people's spiritual and cultural beliefs are and then meet those needs.
So Genevieve mentioned palliative care. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between palliative and hospice?
That's a great question that we get a lot. So palliative care is a specialty of medicine that focuses on pain and symptom management. That's what palliative care means. So there are doctors who are board certified in palliative care, and their focus is pain and symptom management. Hospice is palliative care, but for patients who are at the end of life. So there are certain conditions that are more chronic where you could have palliative care for years where you're not necessarily terminal. But hospice is palliative care just for patients towards the end. And I think one of the biggest myths or misperceptions about hospice has to do with sort of the diagnosis. People get hung up on the diagnosis. Well, I have emphysema, that's not a terminal illness, or I have heart disease, but it's not terminal. And we're always trying to help people, see that these are serious illnesses, and many of them are eventually terminal. And a lot of times people have difficulty seeing Alzheimer's is another big one. When are you at the end? Parkinson's, what does the end look like? I think sometimes people get referred to us so late with those diagnoses because they're just not aware of what the end of Alzheimer's looks like. So we always say, call us. We will send the team to your house to evaluate your loved one. We have a set of criteria. We have lots of years of experience just seeing patients. We don't always go exactly by the criteria in the book because everybody's different and everybody's trajectory looks different. But it's very important to understand that any condition can eventually become terminal, and we need to know what that looks like, what the end stages look like, so that we can be there early in the trajectory to care for someone.
I mean, you had mentioned earlier about the 26-year-old who had an illness, but then opted to go into the trial. Yeah. So with hospice, it's possible to be in hospice and then potentially, or maybe
Correct.
leave
Yes.
as an option and get a different kind of care.
And I think that's another, sometimes people think, oh, once I sign on hospice, that's it. And, they're going to hold me captive or something and I'll never be able to. And that's another misperception, right? Where really, you can access hospice and you can revoke hospice. If a new treatment becomes available or you decide, this isn't for me, I want to go to the hospital or I want to get some sort of intervention that's not available to me on hospice, you can revoke and then you can come right back onto hospice. Okay. So there's that. People do graduate from hospice. They do, it's a lot of really good care and people often improve. And their symptoms are so well managed and they feel so supported that they graduate from hospice and come back on later. So it is a fluid process. It's not so regimented, and that's why we always say, just call us. If there's no pressure, we'll come out, we'll have a conversation just like we're having now, and maybe it'll be the right time, maybe it won't, but generally speaking, it usually is. It's usually, patients are ready by the time they call us.
Right. I think he had a question, and then you can go next.
Hi, thank you so much. So I just one comment and a question. I find it's always fascinating to me how even in a self-selecting group who've decided to spend a Sunday afternoon in such a way that I find that we still apologize for letting everybody know that they're going to die and say things like not to scare you, and how the death phobia shows up. And I think another comment is that like the way that we handle end of life in this culture is not a demonstration of a failure of culture, but a complete lack of one. And I'm someone who believes that there's so much room for improvement that this could actually be the best part of somebody's life. And I don't even like the expression end of life, because life doesn't end. and there is this assertion that a life is ending and how do we take care of this? And the conversation seems to always be also about quality of life. How come it's not about quality of death? And I'm curious about how, like, if you have sensed a change in the culture or people wanting more than what's available. There's that recent op-ed in the Times about the doctor's experience with hospice, and how frustrated or not are you with the people that you are serving with how much still needs to be done and how you can't do. And you also said something about the expectation or the myth that we come within the last week and just give morphine. How often do you find yourselves meeting that expectation rather than challenging it? And how often do you find yourselves treating suffering with painkillers? And is there something available, and do you feel frustrated about the lack of resources for treating actual suffering rather than pain?
Those are great questions. Thank you for your comments also. Yeah, I think that pain management is absolutely a holistic approach, and Carol could be the first to tell you that most of the pain that we are trying to treat is psychological, spiritual pain, absolutely anticipatory grief type pain, regret, deep and very complicated emotions. And we often, quite frankly, don't have the time to do it because of how late people are coming to us, but we do, and it becomes like a trauma response more than a trusted relationship built over time. We do that very well. We can deploy a team out to someone's house who's hours away from dying and just get them that much more comfortable with whatever it is we're doing. We offer massage therapy, various different modalities for bringing comfort to people. We can do that, and we do, but we much prefer to have this longer term relationship with our patients and families, because that does help us to treat all of their symptoms with a wide variety of modalities. But yes, there are absolute frustrations with the healthcare system as it is, 100%. And what gets reimbursed and what doesn't, and we don't even need to go into all of that, but suffice it to say that yes, there's a big failure there. And we're working every day to try to make people aware of a service that does exist, because there's so many services that are lacking in our system right now. And the fact that everybody's being pushed out of hospitals at rapids, care is not taking place in hospitals anymore. Hospitals are for specialty surgeries, and then they want you discharged the very next day. So the push is for care to be at home, but there's no infrastructure to do it. So it's like, everybody get out of the hospital, but who's going to care for you at home? And what does that look like? And what kind of care do you need? I mean, home health aides are in great demand, and they provide the most, as I said, intimate and important service to our patients and to so many people. So yes, there's a lot of frustration. But I think, again, you're able to bring more of the services, more of the type of pain and symptom management through different art therapy, music therapy, all the services that we're offering. You when you have more time, you can really diversify. And that's helpful, I think, to our patients.
So actually, Sarah, go ahead.
I just wanted to circle back about the morphine. So when people come to us, when you sign on to hospice, we don't say, okay, everybody's getting this, this, and this. We're going to look at you and see what you need. We're going to look at your body and see what symptoms you have. If you can't verbalize something, we're going to anticipate by your body. What do you need? Is your face grimacing? Are you moaning? Are you agitated? And always at the smallest dose. Sometimes people come to us and morphine is not what they needed. If something else is working well, there's people, I've seen Tylenol, and that's okay. And it's okay until it's not okay, and we need to review that plan. What's going to help now? And as what Mary was explaining too, I find when I'm out in the field, if I meet someone and they're on service for a few months, we have much more time to review all these other personal psychosocial things that are important. When we're at the Canis Center, it's a much shorter period of time. And there's days that I'm still there at 7:00 because, this family has kids and we need to do something. We're doing thumbprints, we're doing handprints, we're talking, we're playing games. And that's the beauty of hospice. Our hospice is that nobody ever says, you work too much today, you're supposed to clock out. You focus on that family. And everybody who works within our community has the same mindset. So we really try to do that whole person, the whole family at hospice.
So kind of on the flip side of that, somebody asked, why is hospice care underutilized in New York?
Well, the short answer is they don't really know. Though there's a number of theories and some research being done, New York is generally a state where people come for cutting edge medical technology, life-saving interventions. People travel here for those interventions. I do think that there is a the cultural experience of New York being sort of always young, always, anti-aging. There is a big nursing home. A lot of patients end up in nursing homes who should really be on hospice, and that's something that we see a lot. And some of it has to do with caregiving. If you're coming out of a hospital stay and you need a lot of care and there's no one to do that at home, you may, then you end up going to the nursing home for rehab. And unfortunately in New York, because of the way billing works, a lot of those patients get approved for a certain number of days in the nursing home, and the nursing homes do not want to let them go. So even when they're calling us saying, my loved one cannot do this physical therapy, doesn't want to spend the last months of their life, lifting weights and trying to improve their range of motion. They want to be home in their house with their family and their pets and everyone they love. And we're legitimately fighting with administrators at nursing homes to get patients out of there and home on hospice or to the Canis Center. And it is an uphill battle that we face almost every day. And those are only the families that are calling us to say, what's the alternative? How do I get my loved one out of here? There are many, many who don't, because they don't even know it's an option. Right. And when you look at things like nursing home days post-discharge from the hospital in New York State, you do see some unique findings compared to other states. So that's one of the reasons. We also have a very strict certificate of need process in New York, which means not anybody can open a hospice. I don't know if anyone has seen some of the media around California recently, but there have been quite a few pieces about hospice fraud and hospices being bought by venture capitalists, bought and sold and for profit. And this is happening in California at a rapid pace because they don't have a certificate of need process. So anyone can open a hospice. You don't have to have a medical background, and they're for-profit hospices, and there's one on every corner, and then they're bought and sold. New York does not allow that to happen, but some argue that New York has gone too far in the other direction. We only have nonprofit hospices. It's very difficult to start a hospice in New York unless you can prove that there's a need. And so there's one argument that the number of hospices in New York is what is sort of held back the access. I'm not sure I necessarily agree with that. I think it has more to do with the big healthcare systems and how they operate. But it's unfortunate because once something like that hits the media, then the government gets a hold of it, and then it's, hospice is all fraud, and then we're all getting audited all the time. I mean, this is happening to us right now, and we're a small nonprofit hospice that certainly plays by the rules. So it's definitely tricky right now.
Right. Let's have one more question, and then we can wrap up. Oh, okay. I did promise her. Okay. Two more questions then. There we go.
Thank you. When you talk about the whole family system, and do you ever conduct sort of organized interviews with the family about who is available and willing to and able to do different things in the family?
Yes.
Okay.
So that's part of our role is, example, I did an admission nearby yesterday. And so what I see is mom needs extra support. What does that look like? Okay, you live here, you're out of state, you're out of country, you're going back. I said, okay, so here's our choices. Who else do you have? Who's your support? Who's your emotional support? Who's your physical support? Just to help them to plan it. All right, so you got that covered, Dad? Great. What about you? When do you need a break? We have a volunteer. Maybe we can get a volunteer to come in and sit with your wife so you can go for a walk for an hour. Or, hey, you said you have this friend down the street. Let's call them and see. So yes, that's part of our role is to try and figure these things
and it
out.
takes
More of the social workers.
yeah.
You would be surprised because our nurses are beyond amazing. I don't know nursing, but we do. If the nurse needs help, she's giving me the gloves and saying, this is what you need to do.
But a lot of our care plans are pieced together in that way. And I think one of the gifts we can give to people is our sense of their prognosis. Of course, we're not ever going to say we have a crystal ball, but if we can give a family a sense, okay, this is going to be weeks. What can you put together in weeks? Or could you hire someone for a few weeks? Because we have to look at resources. People, resources are lacking. Healthcare is expensive. And so our ability to kind of say, okay, you're looking at months, or you might even be looking at a year. What kind of plan can we put together versus this is going to be quick. Let's get all hands on deck. What sister can come in from out of town? Who's available to do this? That's the way we put together a care plan.
Okay, last question.
Thank you. Fitting me in. I just want to start out by saying that in my life and family's life, we've been touched by hospice and also Brianna's work. And I just wanted to say that with the Canis place, it's such a beautiful place. I know someone talked about spirituality, and the minute that you walk into that building, you can feel good spirit. It's a beautiful feeling. It's so calming, where my cousin passed not that long ago. Also, with Brianna's work, I know you do a lot of work like after the person passes as well. So that's important. And there's an old saying that one of my friends had told me, the more you speak about that person who passed, the higher they go up into the heavens and are recognized. So that's another beautiful element. Also, I had a brother where hospice came into the home and educated us with the stages, and it was so helpful to know this is what to expect next. And he really did appreciate that as well. He was a teacher, so he loved learning about all those lessons, and I think that made it so much better. But I do think that you're right about people not realizing about what hospice, how it's available. One of the questions that I had, you already answered about when do you call in hospice? But I appreciate that idea about you speak about it. You have to come together and talk about it and have that meeting to make those determinations. So that's all important as well. So I just want to thank you as a panel for presenting, because I've learned a lot of new things. And I didn't know that I was a death worker until working with Brianna at Ma's house in the arts, and she identified me as that. So I really appreciate getting, more information on that. Thank you.
Well, in addition to thanking our wonderful panelists, Brianna, Carol, and Mary, I want to thank you guys for all coming out here today and really making it a dialogue about this particular topic. Projections is a very important community program that the cinema does, and it is our goal and it is our work to amplify the work that our other nonprofit organizations here on the East End do. And I'm really grateful for everybody participating today. Thank you all for coming. And please take some materials over there, and there's some coffee and water if you'd like as well. Thank you very much for coming.